Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rotoworld Football Show on our Monday evening waiver wire Q&A. I am Patrick Daugherty, joined by waivers guru Kyle Dvorchak. His article is already live on the site. It'll be actionable all day Tuesday through Tuesday evening. Kyle will be placing my bids about 11:13 Central Time tomorrow night. It used to be way after midnight, but I have to go to bed a little earlier now that I have 4 kids. But I'll be checking the waiver wire real late Tuesday. I'll be looking at your article. What are people going to find when they look at your article in terms of who is the waiver wire ad of the week, Kyle?
Top waiver wire ad typically is someone who popped off last week that we should be focusing on. Ricky Pearsall didn't pop off last week, but a first-round pick playing on an offense we want to target, got over 80% of the routes. That is the type of player that we should be really spending a lot of fab on. I know it didn't materialize in a 20-point game last week, but those are the type of breakout bets that we rarely get to make 2 months into the NFL season.
He dominated in terms of like route rate. I think he ran the most routes somehow.
Debo was super sick, and obviously Ayuk left with a season-ending injury, and that leaves no one.
Still, it was Jacob Cowing. Juwan Jennings was out. That's true. Debo just looked like our guy was in misery on the sideline. The guy should have been in the locker room probably.
Pat, as someone who gets sick, because as you mentioned, you have 15 kids, as someone who gets sick every 2 months for 2 of the most agonizing days of stomach pain ever, you understand.
It's true. Debo was straight up not having a good time. By the way, that 1 year, we got everything in existence. The past 2 years, I haven't gotten that much. So knock on wood as we head into the fall. But yeah, so in 2, who are we talking about? Ricky Pearsall ran a ton of slot routes too. And like you said, Kyle Shanahan really didn't have many better options, but it's kind of eyebrow raising from a coach who normally like puts you through like 2 years of hazing. And like, I was pretty shocked that even considering how dire the circumstances were, that Kyle Shanahan just gave Ricky Pearsall everything he could handle. I think pretty good returns from Ricky Pearsall. So I absolutely agree about him being the waiver wire ad of the week. Kyle Juwan Jennings, though, is also rostered in fewer than 50% of Yahoo leagues. Like say we know both of them are playing in week 8. Debo's back because Debo will be back. He had a stomach bug or whatever. Is Ricky Pearsall like a slam dunk, say for the next 2 to 3 weeks of production over Juwan Jennings, or will it be maybe more of a slow burn? Who do you think is going to produce more, say through the end of the month?
It's a good question. I actually think the answer, if we just assume health, let's just say Juwan comes back and is 100%. The answer is probably technically Juwan, because as you said, it was almost shocking that we don't look back on Sunday's game and go, oh, Chris Conley didn't know he was on this team and he ran 80% of the routes. It was almost shocking that they gave Ricky Pearsall the full-time role. I get they didn't have many choices, but every coach can.
I was shocked. I genuinely was shocked, especially considering it was Shanahan.
I know when I pulled up the numbers, I was like, all right, can we get over 50? Can we get over 50% routes? And we got over 80. It was, I think it was close to 90. So yeah. And I do think that once Juwan comes back, at least in his first game or 2 back, I can see Shanny frustrating us with the lack of usage for first round rookie, even though that should pretty much instantly lock him into a role. But who do I think scores more in week 13, 14, 15? I'm going to bet on the first round rookie from that point onward. So maybe it is, like you said, slightly a slow burn. We maybe jump over our skis just a little bit next week or the week after that. But I still think it's a great long-term play and still a pretty good short-term play.
Here's some sub 50% receiver all-stars, by the way. Romeo Dobbs, I mean, I'm sure in your league he's not available, but he is available and under 50%. Jalen Tolbert, guess got dropped probably a lot during the bye. Dontavian Wicks was a huge week 7 drop. Pop Douglas, Keon Coleman, who I'm sure will come up tonight. Cedric Tillman, who I'm sure will come up tonight. Jerry Jeudy. We're not going to talk about Jerry Jeudy, though. Jerry Jeudy. I can't even talk about Jerry Jeudy anymore. We want to keep this actionable for people during the week, so we can't answer too many questions Monday Night Football, but Mickey Mike had one that was too good to pass up. He's down by 68. Mickey Mike down by 68. He has Lamar and Mark Andrews left. Can I make a comeback? Mickey, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but no, you cannot make a comeback. You need like
maybe this is Scott Fishbowl scoring where you're like, oh, Lamar got 108. That's actually a low performance for him. I didn't understand the scoring. That's actually just his 4th best game of the year. If it's any sort of normal scoring, you're as Pat said, I got bad news.
You need Lamar Jackson to go Mike Vick mode against the Washington football team, whatever year that was, where he scored like 52 points on Monday Night Football. Absent that, Mickey, You are screwed. Let's see here. PBD OTC. He's here almost every week. He let the bank examiner is at his home. Anyway, Justin Fields is a cut. What about Zach Moss? His gut says they have some juice left, but Kyle, in a single quarterback league, as kind of hard as it is to let go of a dual threat like Justin Fields, I would say he's absolutely a cut. Do you agree? Then we'll move on to Zach Moss.
Yeah, I mean, even in a 2 QB league, it's a tough decision to make because we could actually get starts next week from quarterbacks who aren't rostered in even 2 QB/Superflex leagues, like Marcus Mariota, for example. Frankly, Russell Wilson, for example, are guys who will be starting, and in a Superflex league, starting right now matters a lot, and starting in week 12, 14, 15 is sort of vaguely useful. It's worth a stash, but you don't have to keep guys who are vaguely worth a stash. And in single QB leagues, Fields is easily a cut. He should not be rostered in almost any single QB league.
I will say in a super flex, I might give Fields like 2 or 3 more weeks to say we get like a stink bomb from Russ, which is quite possible. I mean, 2 of Russ's biggest plays were fluke deep passes to George Pickens last night. People cannot stop pointing out to me. So maybe if I have a roster spot to spare, but I'm telling you, roster spots are hard to come by right now. You won't be in this situation in most leagues. I'm in a 10-team, 2-quarterback league. I had to cut Josh Downs yesterday morning, which, I kind of thought he might not produce, obviously, but I didn't feel great about it. But it's kind of year where you'd have to start making those kind of decisions. PBD also wants to know on my update on my legal battle with Denny Carter. Denny announced on Friday it's back on. All I'll say is we'll keep it cordial on the podcast on Tuesday. That's all I'll say. Jackson Gillette wondering, should I trade Garrett Wilson for James Cook? Half-point PPR.
Oh, this is like the down bad bowl because I don't feel great about where we are with either of these guys. I think I'll go James Cook, though.
I'll go James. But first off, why are we concerned about James Cook? He got out-rushed by Ray Davis yesterday against the Titans. Kind of a weird game where James Cook still easily out-touched him. Ray Davis basically it was not garbage time. It was garbage time when he scored the touchdown. But in the third quarter, when the game was still sort of in doubt, it was never in doubt about poorly Mason Rudolph was playing. Ray Davis did kind of get a series to himself. As I've been cautioning on the podcast, this is a team that always wants to be a 2-back backfield. They absolutely love the power back archetype, Kyle. But I don't know if I'm panicked about James Cook necessarily, but did I lay out the reasons for concern there with James Cook eloquently?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big concern is not that what we saw last week holds. Last week was survivable. James Cook outcarried Ray Davis 12-5 on a higher rushing volume game. Say that's 20-8. Like that's the split we see with a lot of actual RB1s. It's that his continued good play makes that split smaller and smaller and smaller. I'm not sure that ends up ever happening, but it's definitely possible. And honestly, we have a very similar last week, maybe not the most concerning for Garrett Wilson, but do we expect that split to continue where he tied among other players for a team high in targets? Does he out-target Davante Adams going forward? I know Davante Adams is extremely familiar with both the system and the quarterback, but it was still his first game this season with Rodgers and with Nathaniel Hackett. And in his first game, he already tied Garrett Wilson. Do we think that progresses to a point where he's out-targeting him every week? I kind of think it does. So both these guys are sort of trending in the wrong direction, despite being okay last week in terms of their usage.
Prime era Aaron Rodgers really easily supported like 2 top 18 wide receivers, but I agree. I'm worried about Garrett. Davante is going to blast up ahead of him probably as early as this week. And if you're taking, 2 guys with question marks, I would much rather have James Cook. By the way, is Zach Moss droppable? We forgot to answer part 2 of that question. What would you say about holding on to Zach Moss, who seems like he's kind of decisively lost that battle with Chase Brown? He's still playing a lot of snaps, but Chase Brown is just so thoroughly out-touching him at this point. Are we cutting Zach Moss, Kyle?
Yeah, it's fine. If you needed at all a breakout wide receiver, I would easily take Ricky Pearsall just as a pure, who do I hold from here until the next month or whatever. I would take a guy like Ricky Pearsall over Zach Moss. You don't have to cut him. Like you said, still out there getting some touches, getting a decent amount of snaps, but he's getting out-touched and outplayed by what used to be his backup, now the starter. So yeah, you don't have to be holding him at all. He's not a guaranteed cut, but he's a good candidate.
By the way, it's kind of classy from the Bank Examiner. They have announced that they are in the chat. D-Boggy D has revealed himself to be here as the Bank Examiner, so just be careful what you say, Kyle, in front of the Bank Examiner. How would we rank Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry, Michael Evans, Devontae Adams, rest of season and PPR, kind of guys bunched up in that wide receiver 10 to 18 range. Nate is maybe working on a trade. How are we ranking these guys rest of season?
Devontae 1, Mike Evans 2, Terry 3. You could flip those for me if you wanted.
You can honestly reorder the entire thing. I maybe just put Mike Evans 3rd because I think so thoroughly in PPR brain at this point where I get like dissatisfied with Mike Evans in that low end wide receiver 1 range, but that's what he'll produce as. But Devontae Adams, I think, is the best combination of floor and ceiling. Mike Evans, I probably will put 2nd just because the touchdown potential. He's got a nice floor. Like it's 4 catches for 40 yards. It might sound bad. That's his floor. He scores every other week. I think his floor is just a little higher than Terry McLaurin, and he's going to be scoring more than Terry McLaurin. So I think that's the order we're going to go. I'm going to answer this one really quick from Chad. Do we think the Ayuk injury makes it more or less likely the 49ers rush CMC back? Neither. I think the 49ers, they've had this plan long enough. This would have been the week to rush him back. It was the Super Bowl rematch. Jordan Mason's banged up. They stayed disciplined there. I don't see any reason to expect them to rush him back now, even more for week 8. I said the plan all along was early November. I know their bye is coming up. Whatever he had done to his Achilles in Germany, seems like maybe it's finally setting in. And yeah, Chad, I don't think it really is going to affect what they're doing with Mr. Christian McCaffrey. Jerry Medina is wondering, here's the kind of tough drop question we're going to be getting more and more, Kyle. Is wondering if we should drop Jordan Addison for Jalen Waddle. So first, I'll answer that question, but also like, is Jordan Addison a kind of guy that has to be rostered, say like a standard 12-team home league, like a hyper competitive, like industry league where people treat wide receivers like actual gold bars? I would never consider dropping Jordan Addison, but how much do we have to hold on to like a number 2 guy in a low pass volume offense? And are you dropping Jordan Addison for Jalen Waddle? I think I'm definitely saying yes to that one.
Yeah, I think in most leagues, you do not have this kind of opportunity where I think when the Dolphins are operating at full strength, primarily that being Tua being out there, Jalen Waddle is a high weekly ceiling wide receiver 1-2 border guy. We saw this especially 2 years ago. Last year, he was that guy and just left every freaking game with an injury, but all of his periphery nerd stats were of the exact same player we saw 2 years ago. And Jordan Addison is much more clearly, I think, just a kind of a limited player in that he's a great splash play artist, but the way they use him is really frustrating for fantasy purposes, whereas when Jalen Waddle doesn't leave a game early, he is both getting the ball more often and being more efficient than Jordan Addison, which is not even an indictment of Addison. Waddle was just that special for 2 years, and the offense has completely fallen apart, obviously. I think they will be able to put the pieces back together, if not this week, very soon. We'll see, but I feel optimistic we see 2 within the next 2-ish weeks. So I'd say Waddle. Addison is not a drop in most cases. This isn't most cases.
It's not. I completely agree on Waddle over Addison. I will say there's just something about the Dolphins offense that was all right. It was 1.5 games before Tua got hurt. Something already kind of felt off even before the injury. I just wouldn't be surprised if they're not quite the money printing machine they were in the past. But I mean, Waddle's track record speaks for itself. It's a system where it's absolutely great to be the number 2 weapon. He kind of got screwed by like a really low touchdown percentage last year. I mean, he's getting hurt more and more, Waddle. But Waddle is an easy call over Addison. By the way, who do you like rest of season more, Brock Purdy or Caleb Williams?
I think at this point it has to be Caleb. I mean, not that Caleb. I know that Kyle Shanahan can just spin great wide receiver. I mean, we did it with Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings had maybe still the best fantasy week of the year. It's got to be close.
He probably did, yeah.
It was like literally, I think 170 yards.
It's $175 and 3 scores. So I don't think
it has to be the best game of the year. And honestly, it might not be that close. And that was out of a guy who is like known to be, he gets, 40% of the snaps and he's a real good blocker. Oh, and he's also Calvin Johnson once a year, apparently, when they need him to be. So this guy can just spin up great receiver production and in turn, great quarterback production out of thin air. Ayuk's really good at football, and losing him is going to hurt. And Caleb is moving sort of in the other direction where, if you look at his season in totality, it's not going to look particularly special. It's mostly weighed down by the first 2 or 3 weeks in which he was objectively bad. He's been really good since then. So I think it could go either way because Purdy's efficiency is not going to bottom out without Ayuk. As good as Ayuk is, I just mentioned how good this team is at churning out good efficiency numbers. I do think I'm going Caleb here.
Caleb seemed like he was ascending to like the next level, of course, for the Bears bye. We like that he's coming off bye as the rookie. The only thing I'll say, two guys in offenses that ideally want to be like lower pass volume.
Yep.
And just the track record for Purdy, of course, is longer. The skill cores are still pretty similar in terms of overall talent. I might let that tip the scales in favor of Caleb, but it's close enough where, like, if you did continue to roster both them rest of the season, you'd be playing matchups. So, like, reasonable minds can like disagree based on which one is the better one. There's a really valid case for either of them. Delinquent Labs wondering, is Tank Bigsby a classic sell high, or is he a hold? Travis Etienne probably coming back in week 8, Kyle. Bigsby has that kind of profile as someone who, like, there's a really good chance he'll never be more valuable than he is now, but there's also a good chance that he's just really good and taking control of his backfield. What do you tell people on Tank Bigsby?
Yeah, I'm going to assume in most leagues, they aren't just seeing what he did last week and be like, I guess we can lock him in for 20 plus touches and over 100 yards, few touchdowns every single week. I think more so people are going to be worried that Travis Etienne comes back and just resumes the role that he had played all year. It sounds like you kind of agree with me that I don't think we see that. It's very hard to put the Ferrari back in the garage, as we're seeing with someone like Bucky Irving, where now we're just getting a full-blown committee, despite Rachaad White opening the year, is this guy gets every snap. He plays the passing downs. He gets the goal line work. When you are so thoroughly outplayed by your backup, that just cannot hold over the course of an entire season. And Bigsby has pretty thoroughly outplayed Etienne this year.
Yeah. We have another one from Delinquent Labs real quick. I'm just going to rattle off names from my comment. Jaden Daniels is out week 8. Who's the best QB waiver wire target on a single? Like, Kyle features Drake May in his waivers column, so check that out. Tua is under 50% rostered and coming back against the Cardinals. Jameis Winston against the Ravens. Hopefully, it could be DTR. Justin Herbert is available. Then it's Drake May, Russell Wilson. Drake May is definitely the best combination of, like, upside, like this week upside and rest of season upside. Those are the names you'll be looking at on waiver wire. Delinquent Labs. Jerry, by the way, too, how do you feel about George Pickens with Russell Wilson? We saw the connection last night. It was the second best game of the year. But does anything really materially change? It doesn't seem like it really matters who the quarterback is for George Pickens. Everyone has to throw him these moon balls, and they have varying degrees of success. What do you think about Russ with Pickens?
Yeah, I don't think the quality of the targets probably changes all that much, because I think at this point, Russ probably still has the sort of wherewithal to throw that ball. I don't know if he has the physical skill to nail that moon ball the way he used to. And Fields is kind of the opposite. He doesn't really have the down-to-down accuracy to hit that, but he does definitely have the arm. I do think the big difference is we're just going to get more passing volume when your quarterback is not nearly as prone to turning dropbacks into scrambles, which are just net losses in terms of overall passing volume. So I don't think the efficiency in terms of like per target efficiency will change as much as it looked like it was going to, was that last night? But I do think the overall volume of the offense just has to go up based on the style of play of the new quarterback.
We have another weekly viewer, Ben, wondering if he can drop Cortland Sutton. We very disparagingly calls Cortland nothing.
Yeah. You can drop him.
Been pretty rough for Cortland. You sure you can drop? You sure about that? You sure about that, Kyle?
Pretty sure. I'm pretty sure.
Not even a touchdown-based wide receiver 4, question mark.
Low wide receiver 4. You don't have to drop him. He's not.
That's
truly
the thing. Yeah.
Cortland nothing. But like, I get you were calling him that for a reason. It is not. It's hardly slanderous. It's more accurate than it is slanderous. Like you said, maybe you can run good and get a touchdown, but this team doesn't project to throw a ton of touchdowns anyways. It's not like, this is an ancillary piece of a great offense. Kind of the opposite. He's a middling piece of a middling at best offense. You can definitely drop Sutton.
I think you hit the nail on the head where you don't have to drop Cortland Sutton. It's not like someone like, get this guy off your roster, man. But if you do drop him, you're not going to be like 2 weeks like, oh, my God, man, like, why'd I drop Cortland Sutton?
Mm-hmm.
So Cortland Sutton is droppable. Let's say that. The Grumpy Unk podcast, wondering podcast competitors here. Do we think Kareem Hunt will be the Chiefs' RB1 rest of season? And is the answer a simple yes, as long as he does not get hurt, Kyle?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty concise way to put it. Their options are bleak, but he's getting the job done and he knows the system. That's kind of all that matters right now. CEH, that return has been quote unquote looming for like several weeks, but like this isn't happening at this point. Like it's just Kareem is too well established. Even like a diminished Kareem Hunt is doing way more than Clyde Edwards-Helaire ever did. There's just not really any reason to see this change. By the way,
Boggy D is saying he's after they close the Spirit Halloweens in Denny's backyard, he's gonna be opening some Christmas villages. So Denny thought he was out of the woods. Denny is very much not out of the woods. Okay, we got maybe a little ahead of ourselves because we forgot maybe about the existence of Isaiah Pacheco, Kyle.
No, I didn't forget about that.
So Delinquent Labs with a follow-up here to Kareem Hunt. He has Pacheco on his IR. Will he be relevant in his return? I mean, he definitely will be relevant. So let's amend our answer here on Kareem Hunt. Like, what happens when Isaiah Pacheco comes back? I don't think he's particularly close to return. It's like at least another month. Honestly, probably 6 to 7 weeks. That's really kind of what it comes down to. Pacheco will probably, if the Chiefs make their annual deep playoff run, will probably be back. But I think it's going to be too late in the season to claim RB1 status from Kareem Hunt. What do you think there?
I remember it being like 8-ish weeks, 8+ weeks whenever he went down. What was it, week 2 or 3? I don't know, something in that. So we're still at least, I would gauge it's probably closer to like another month or more. Like you said, the 8 weeks felt like the minimum in which you're like, it could be 8 weeks. And then they like open his window at 10 weeks and he comes back at 12 weeks or something like that. But I do think he probably comes back and relatively quickly cements himself as the team's RB1. But I think we both agree that we're not particularly close to that. I will admit, we totally got way deep into our foxhole and forgot there was like a broader thing going on of the actual starting running back not being here.
I know. It is weird. That injury, man, I feel like it's the classic. I feel like 8 weeks is kind of what it takes just to be fully healed. Then you have to recondition. Like, is he really being conditioned to be the lead back in an NFL offense? And like Kareem Hunt is not hitting explosive runs, but I feel like he handles the down-to-down work better than Isaiah Pacheco did.
Well, I don't know about that, but he handles it well enough.
Yeah, he handles it well enough. I'm not saying he's as talented of a runner as Isaiah Pacheco is right now, but you know the deal with Pacheco where he's sometimes like he should be gaining more yards than he probably does sometimes. But yeah, we got ahead of ourselves there. Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco. Jacoby Myers, still a must roster. He's been really frustrating with his ankle injuries, not on IR, which suggests he's going to return this week or next. Aiden O'Connell's hurt, so they have to play the better quarterback, better being a relative term, with Gardner Minshew. Are we holding on to Jacoby Myers in 12-team fantasy leagues, Kyle?
Yeah, you probably have to. He was getting like true wide receiver 1 usage in the 2 games he played without Devontae Adams. He strikes me as someone that when they come back, like, are they going to keep throwing to DJ Turner and Trey Tucker and Christian Wilkerson? Obviously not. Jacoby's a pretty good NFL receiver. He's not great or anything, but in the absence of surrounding talent outside of Brock Bowers, he's going to get a lot of targets. And like you said, doesn't for the team's success, it frankly doesn't matter a ton who they play at quarterback. They're kind of just doomed either way. But for our fantasy success, we want Gardner Minshew under there. So I do think you kind of have to hold him.
I think you do have to hold him too. He's going to be top 36, Jacoby Myers. I mean, pretty well-established track record of success with 2 different teams. I mean, they've got to have someone absorb these targets. Brock Bowers can't handle everything. Trey Tucker's not cutting it. All these journeymen are not cutting it. It's frustrating. But yeah, I think Jacoby Myers is very much still a must roster. Just want to say thank you very much to Stuntman Chuck 85 for the kind words. Really, really appreciate it. Ben is back, so he's trying to find the Courtland Sutton line. Are we cutting Courtland Sutton for Cedric Tillman, who popped up out of nowhere to lead the post Amari Cooper Browns in receiving? And just give people then your spiel on Cedric Tillman. Like, what kind of asset is this going forward? Is he someone we need to be adding this week in 12-team leagues?
Need is a strong word because he was ultimately one of the least efficient rookies we've seen in a kind of a long time coming out of Tennessee. He was also not that great of a prospect. He was a late bloomer who then in his final season got banged up, and then he fails as a rookie. So I think we're going to be probably a bit overexcited by the fact that he vacuumed up some targets in a true void of receiving talent because he frankly plays in a group of receivers who are, they should, based on their quote talent, be a lot better than they are in Elijah Moore, Jerry Jeudy, and himself. He stepped up, but I don't want to bet on him consistently stepping up. I guess I would still hold Sutton over him, but it's
honestly,
yeah, I'd hold.
We
Sutton
might be getting to like cut Courtland Sutton time because that was one game, like a weird game script with weird quarterbacks. But I'm like, yeah, sign me up for that. I'd rather see where Cedric Tillman takes this than whatever Courtland Sutton has got going on. So I would vote yes, just with the caveat, Ben. that it could look like an absolutely horrible move within 1 to 2 weeks. Like, yep, said Tillman does not pop back up again. Should have seen that coming.
Picking up said Tillman could definitely look bad in hindsight. I think it actually probably the most likely outcome is that it does, because I'm not sure he's that good. I probably think he's not that good. That's what happens when you really flop as a rookie and you're not super highly drafted. Ultimately, not everyone's good, and he's probably not good. But on the other hand, does Sutton really punish you that badly for dropping him?
No.
Oh no, he went 4 for 60 and got a touchdown. I missed out on my 16 PPR points. You'll be fine if you drop him and he has a quote good game, because he doesn't have that path to really making you pay for dropping him.
It's gone viral several times on Twitter. Former baseball guy Paul De Podesta's wide receiver picks not working out too well for the Cleveland Browns. Diego Lopez, he's with us all the time. Are you willing to wait another week to see if Anthony Richardson can learn how to throw to players who actually get open like Josh Downs, Kyle? 4 starts, 4 games this year, Anthony Richardson has played start to finish. He's yet to complete more than 50% of his passes. He's completed more than 10 passes one time. Is there any reason to see like pass volume entering, just greater accuracy? Or, I mean, I just don't know what we would base it on, Kyle. Do you have any reason to believe we might see that?
I don't have a lot of faith that we'll see it. I mean, we just have not seen anything to make us believe we will see that. Both, I mean, they kind of go hand in hand, the pass volume and the accuracy. Your team is understandably going to limit the amount of passes you get if you can't complete any of your passes. And this is who Anthony Richardson was in college, and it's who he was in his limited rookie season, and it's who he's been this year. There just really hasn't been any sign that he's anything other than what they essentially paid for, was a real project just as a down-to-down accuracy thrower. There are other things he does really well. Hitting the layups is not one of them. You kind of have to hit the layups, especially, you don't have to be perfect on the layups. Not every quarterback is going to drill every single, like, you know, Mahomes hits every single throw short of 10 yards down the field. It's also every one of his throws at this point right now. But he does hit. Yeah, I know. He does, but he does hit all of them, right? That's why the team can survive with never making explosive play, is because he is 99% from
He's
the
Brady.
line.
He's just Brady. That's, of course, what drove people insane about Brady, is that like we take for granted the layups with people like Mahomes and Brady, and then you see with guys like Anthony Richardson how it's not actually easy. And Richardson, if you have to cling to anything, there is one thing you can cling to, and it's just talent. It's that he's good enough, he's physically gifted enough, he's savvy enough, he's a good pocket operator, that he'll figure this out. But there's nothing on his film, nothing in the stats that say he's going to figure it out. It's all about betting on talent, and this is a really tough bet to make in the middle of the season. Question here about kind of a fantasy philosophy question. As far as lineups are concerned, is it suboptimal to play 2 Buffalo Bills, Amari Cooper and James Cook? What I've always told people, Kyle, is like, listen, man, if they project for your most points, then play them. But I don't know if you had any greater philosophical take on that.
No, you're a freaking nerd like the rest of us. That's frankly like how I'm taking almost every one of my lineup decisions. Maybe if I get late in a matchup and I somehow have the flexibility, I'll like if I have an option, I'll stack my wide receiver with my quarterback if I'm an underdog, or I'll try and flip that to spread out the risk if I'm a pretty big favorite. But these are very marginal situations. You are almost always best served taking the guys who project the most. And especially in this case, you get to do it with guys who play with Josh Allen, who's really good at football, who's really good at getting points on the board. I'd feel a little more wary about this if it was like, should I play Javonte and Cortland Sutton in the same lineup? I'd be like, oh, you're not getting 2 touchdowns out of this duo. But especially in this case, if they project for the most points, it's because they're both good players who play for the Bills, who should score a lot of points.
And just the way you have to look at it, like if you're deciding between Amari Cooper and say receiver B, like the fact that you're starting James Cook doesn't make receiver B any more likely to get more points than Amari Cooper. And it's frustrating because it is correlated. And then if it's a bad day, you're in trouble. But it's just you can't like overthink it like that. And you just got to play the guys with the best projections is what it comes down to. Chad wondering, is wide receiver 1 Malik Neighbors over? I would say that's an overreaction, Chad. But like the Giants, we kind of worried about this kind of performance from the Giants. Not that Daniel Jones had been good, but he had been better. But we got more of the Daniel Jones we were expecting yesterday. And it is a fair concern. Like, will Daniel Jones's play like descend to the level where like no one can survive in this offense? But I don't think we're quite there yet. Kyle, what do you think?
I think even Daniel Jones has generally been good enough in the NFL that he is not a no one can survive type of quarterback. He's not good, but the no one can survive quarterbacks are real down on the charts. They're the guys where there's a gap and you're like, oh, I didn't notice Deshaun Watson and Will Levis hang down at the bottom of the chart. Daniel Jones is kind of at the back of the pack of your mostly not that great quarterbacks. And for as good as Neighbors is, that's enough for him to, I still think, be a pretty relatively consistent wide receiver one, especially given that he earns so much of the passing attack. He's not just good. He doesn't just get the ball a lot. He does both of those things better than already better than a lot of players in the NFL, better than all but maybe 8 to 10 wide receivers in the NFL. So I'm not awfully concerned. And frankly, if I was an offensive coordinator and my line was beat up, the first thing I would do would be the first thing Daniel Jones, when that football, the leather hits your hands, find Malik Neighbors. That's what I would tell Daniel Jones. So I'm not saying it will be good for him, but I think good players are generally more insulated to bad situations because their teams will want to get them the ball more.
Could not agree more. Nick wondering about our rest of season take on Brian Robinson. His buddy wants to trade for Odunze. Might send a package. Brian Robinson. He's one of those hard runners. He's a tough runner that I think might leave him susceptible to injuries like we've seen. But what we've seen is a guy who's kind of pushing for RB1 value almost. But do you feel optimistic about Brian Robinson rest of season? It's always hard to maintain optimism when guys who are hurt. But how do you feel about B-Rob rest of season?
Yeah, I feel pretty good about him. I mean, he's not a true 3-down back. I don't think anyone values him as such, but he's a really efficient back on 2 downs. He's actually kind of efficient on the passing downs he plays too. It's not his primary role in the offense, but he actually is a perfectly adequate pass catcher, if not maybe adequate plus, probably just based on the fact that he's good with the ball in his hands. And he really is a strong physical 2-down runner. And not just that he does what the coaches want. He gets what's blocked. He is a decently explosive runner. He's not a true he's not Najee Harris, right? Najee Harris is actually a fine tackle breaker, but he doesn't end up providing anything after breaking a tackle. Brian Robinson does both of those things relatively well. And outside of the fact that maybe we don't end up getting Jaden Daniels this week, as soon as he comes back, I expect the offense to be really good at generating points. And it's really hard to defend Brian Robinson when you've got Jaden Daniels back there. So I feel pretty good about him. I kind of like what you said. He's a sneaky, maybe not true RB1 candidate, but will pop up for a lot of RB1 weeks, especially as buys start rolling back in. Inexplicably, none of them are next week, right?
I know. It makes
come on.
To take people inside the industry, when it's week 8 and you're getting ready to prepare for the week and you see there's no buys, you're like, oh my God, why?
It's sick. How does this happen? Our bodies have acclimated to the atmosphere of having less than 32 teams playing, and then they just slap you with a 32 team slate in week 8.
That was tough. Friend of the show, Eastbound and Down character Stevie Janowski says that Juwan Jennings did indeed have the biggest wide receiver performance of the year. Reese has a question that's on probably a lot of people's minds. I talked about dropping Josh Downs early in the show. I did it even before yesterday's game. Is Josh Downs kind of in that same territory we mentioned with Courtland Sutton, where you don't have to drop him, you can drop him? It is a little different in that Josh Downs has a lot more upside than Courtland Sutton. And frankly, we don't really know if Anthony Richardson will start the rest of the season. The injury history is very long. They could even decide they're competing and just decide to go with Joe Flacco. So it's not apples to oranges with Courtland Sutton. But what are you telling people about Josh Downs, Kyle?
Yeah, he strikes me as somewhere between the Courtland Sutton, you really don't have to hold on to him, and the Jordan Addison, you're holding on to him in 90% of situations, because I don't think you can start Josh Downs this week. I mean, He's really good at football. It's not fun to say you should bench Josh Downs. He earns targets, and he's more efficient on those targets than someone like Wandale. He's PPR scammy to a degree, but I do think he adds something to the offense where Wandale objectively takes stuff away from his offense when you target him. I do think Downs adds something to that, and he does it very often when his quarterback can get him the ball, and his quarterback just cannot do that right now. I still, like you said, I still want to hold on to him, especially when I know a player is very talented. It just makes me give them a longer leash on how long I'm going to keep them on my roster, despite knowing I can't play them. I'm going to give Josh Downs a little bit of leash and see how this goes.
Josh Downs is someone I'm trying to find reasons to keep. I'll say that, again, I was in a really tough situation. I had to cut him. I actually played. I would never do that. I should never admit this publicly. I played without a kicker. I needed a defense and a kicker after hoarding players all week. and I decided to just risk it without a kicker and drop Josh Downs for a defense. It looks like
no. I think you should admit that. That makes you sound smart and strategic. I think that's if you can win without the kicker, you should be doing it. You should be hoarding all of this guy could really change the complexion of my team down the road type of players. If it does not cost you wins right now, did you end up winning?
It appears I'm going to win. It's not official yet, though. Depends on what happens in this doubleheader. EJ Mead is wondering about trading Jahmyr Gibbs and Ladd McConkey for DK and CeeDee Lamb. Seems like there's a little too much value on side 2 not to take side 2. But do you agree, Kyle?
Yeah, I think you have to. I mean, maybe there's an argument made that like, oh, David Montgomery could miss time. He doesn't look like he's going to miss much time, maybe a week. And that's going to be a really fun Jahmyr Gibbs week. If it was a longer absence, I would be telling you Gibbs could be the RB1 overall for however long Montgomery is out. That seems like a week tops, if even a week. And if that's the case, Gibbs is more like the RB 13 or 12 or 11, and you're getting a ton of value on the other side. So yeah, I agree with you.
So we got a lot of questions. I'm sorry if we have not gotten to your question yet, but we just have a lot of really good ones tonight. Darn, now I lost the one I wanted to answer here, Kyle. Darren has the question. He's trying to get out from underneath Jordan Mason. We got the looming return of Christian McCaffrey. What kind of receiver could he possibly hope to get for Jordan Mason at this point? To me, you just probably got to start with like wide receiver 3 with question marks. Wide receiver 3 who might not even be a wide receiver 3. Maybe someone like the aforementioned Jordan Addison. Maybe someone like Romeo Dobbs if you're lucky. Maybe someone like Christian Kirk. Does that strike you as correct? Like, I feel like you can't get more than maybe like a fake wide receiver 3 for Jordan Mason. But what would you say?
Maybe that means you just hold Mason, or maybe that means I think you should shoot higher. Because for me, I mean, I think they're by, we mentioned this earlier, I believe it's in week 9. So.
I believe it is week 9. I'll double check that while you're talking.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's week 9, which I mean, I guess to that point, it means we have maybe just one game left. Chris McCaffrey, I doubt, is to return.
And it's against the Cowboys in week 8 than it is the week 9 bye. So the Cowboys, maybe the worst run defense in the league. It might be worth holding on to him just even for that game.
I know. What I'm thinking is like, I can just lock in a win now, and I miss out on, if you're right about the market, I miss out on Romeo Dobbs. So be it. Let me just give me another dub this week. And maybe it wouldn't be shocking if Christian McCaffrey, who has only given us bad injury news all year, like the injury has only gotten worse and worse and worse, despite him not playing at all, maybe he doesn't return in week 10. You still get a little bit of upside juice. I still think it's pretty likely he returns in week 10, but there's still a little bit of juice down the road that he doesn't play or they severely ease him back in, which would probably be relatively smart given the seemingly severe nature of the injury. So I think unless I can get more on that wide receiver 2-3 border is probably I'm just going to end up holding Mason. We mentioned Jalen Waddle earlier. You think you could swing that move given how disappointing Waddle has been?
No, especially because now if a manager held on to Waddle that long, they're not going to flip him.
They're sick
with Tua coming back. No, I mean now they finally survived. Now Tua.
Yeah, they made it to the other side of the tunnel. Yeah. They're not giving up at this point. I think the answer is probably just to hold Mason then.
I actually agree with that. They'd probably just hold Mason, ride out this blockbuster week. But if you're intent on trading Jordan Mason, you have no use for him this week. I think you just got to start in that wide receiver 3-4 borderline and hope.
Does Jameson Williams count on this? Because he's had like 1 catch in 2 of the past 4 weeks. Do you think?
Man, Jamo's gonna be a hard guy to rank this week. Yeah, I would definitely trade Jordan Mason for Jamo, to be honest. Jamo still has weak flipping ability, even on like 2 catches. So
that's why I threw him out. I think he's if someone's getting disappointed or frustrated with him, that's the type of move I think he kind of falls a little bit more on the Waddle side of this conversation, but maybe not quite up there. And that's the type of move I think you should be making the flip for.
If you're going to trade him, it's a tough situation for you to no buys this week, but find someone who really needs a running back this week because Jordan Mason is a week 8 smash play. Diego Lopez wondering if we should continue to sunk cost it with Jonathan Brooks, whose timeline has been getting longer. Chuba keeps reducing. I actually don't know what Chuba's week 7 box score was. But what are we doing with Jonathan Brooks with this very lengthy rehab and recovery, Kyle?
I mean, you've made it this far. Obviously it's been frustrating. During the draft process, this is just a complete lie. They were like, well, might be ready by July. I think he literally said that while talking to reporters. Maybe it was the combine. It's like, yeah, I think I'll be cleared by July. That was a lie. But anyway, you were still probably, as this person points out, maybe a week out, maybe we're 2 weeks out, but that's pretty close. We're closer than we were at the start of the season. And what does he give you, or what does someone like, Charbonnet or Jalen Warren give you that Jonathan Brooks doesn't? It's like a RB3/3.5 this week, and that's it. Like, neither of these guys, barring an injury to the starters ahead of them, are hardly relevant. Like, both of their starters play enough over them. Maybe it's not true of Jalen Warren. He didn't have a great role last week. It was more so that they ran the football a lot. And if you're the number 2 back on Arthur Smith offense, that still gets you there. He's also been really, really, really inefficient this year, which strikes me as he's maybe not fully back, maybe not even close to healthy, given how good he was in previous years. If these are the stashes that are your options versus Brooks, give me Brooks.
Yeah, I think I would keep sunk cost in it as well. Western Goods, wondering about healthy Juju Smith-Schuster or healthy Jacoby Myers. I would say not a great sign for Juju that he got ruled out for Sunday on Monday. No. It could be a multi-week injury. But who would you rather have right now on your roster? Juju Smith-Schuster or Jacoby Myers?
Yeah, I mean, like, a healthy Juju is like, oh, what about this NFT? It doesn't exist. It's not real. I don't think we're getting it, which is like not fun to say. I feel like you being like, this guy's never going to be healthy again. But I mean, like, if that was true of anyone, it does feel like Juju. So I'll say Jacoby Myers, which I am factoring in a bit of health, but it's very close if both are healthy too. I think you're probably getting a larger cut of the pie if you're going to Jacoby Myers. And frankly, the cut of the Chiefs pie is not that good. They're not throwing the football that often or that well for the purposes of scoring fantasy points. So I'd kind of go.
I think if they were both healthy today, like if they were both announced they're fully go for week 8, I would probably take Juju.
I would have a marginal lean towards Juju. I think it's close. I think it's close. And the thing is,
I think that the overall situation though is better for Jacoby Myers because I think he's going to be back sooner. And I think I'd rather have Jacoby Myers. A horrible question no one wants to answer because no one knows what to do with this guy, Kyle. What are we actually doing with Dontavian Wicks? Everyone dropped him and he pops back up. It's such a crowded skill core. The passing volume hasn't been what we've expected or hoped for with Green Bay. What is the final answer here on Dontavian Wicks?
I mean, I think when they're all healthy, you don't have to hold him. You probably shouldn't. I mean, you can't play him. He's running about half the routes, maybe like slightly more than half the routes. Primarily when Christian Watson is healthy, his health is mostly what is typically up for debate in this team's receiver room. And when that's the case, Watson is also frustrating and really difficult to play, but Wicks is even on the sort of 60-40, the 40 side of that split for the wide receiver 3 role. I think he's only really a viable fantasy option if they are missing one of the other 3 receivers.
Oh, we've got some really good. We got 2 different questions. Lynn Dorfins is asking one, and someone else. Lynn Dorfins, I'm going to give it to Mr. Kanice guy, though. They want to know about David Njoku rest of season. Is he top 5 at the tight end position? 14 targets yesterday.
Check on him, and otherwise I'll keep rolling.
Are we gonna say David Njoku's top 5, Kyle, rest of season?
Yeah, tight end's terrible. Sure.
Well, actually, 5 is pushing it. I'm gonna say every week. I think every week I'll have him ranked as like the tight end 6 or 7, probably. So he's like right there, and maybe some weeks he'll bleed into the top 5.
Even with JMO at quarterback.
Yeah, I view Njoku in the 5 to 8 range. Is what I'll say.
Who are the 5? Who are the 5 ahead of him?
Brock, McBride, Kelsey. I think Kittle. Those 4 are ahead of him every week.
Agree.
I feel like that's the problem. Is that there's 4 guys who are for sure ahead of him every week. There's other guys like Ingram or whatever who have good matchups. That's why I don't think I'll just say he's top 5, like set and forget kind of.
I think I'll put him in that. I'm going to give him the 5 spot, but I agree. There's a tier break from those 4 down. So, we kind of roughly agree. It's semantics.
Yeah, I think we do roughly agree. Man, we got a lot of good questions here. I scrolled too far ahead now. Real quick, answer this one quickly. Any concerns with Joe Burrow? I would say no. The Bengals are just a good team, and they're the classic. If they don't need to pass, they're just not going to do it. But they're going to need to pass a lot. This defense is not at all good for the Cincinnati Bengals. So I'm not worried about Joe Burrow. Sorry, I'm just going to take a second to read a few questions here. Blah, blah, blah. Real quick trade question. Adam Barnes wondering, should he trade Jaden Reed and Tyrone Tracy for Joe Mixon? That kind of seems like a slam dunk to me, but a lot of people value Jaden Reed more highly than I do.
I'm one of them. He's real good at football. He's
very good at football, but I don't think he's good enough to rise above this rotation that they've got going. And maybe he, in the literal sense, does, or in 2 receiver sets, he's out there. But this is like the Hunger Games, man, with these 5 guys, which you include Tucker Kraft fighting for targets. And I think Jaden Reed's one of those guys every week is just like disappointing you more often than he's not. But yeah, there's 2 for 1. Are you trading Jaden Reed and Tyrone Tracy for Joe Mixon?
I will not. I will take the Jaden Reed side. I understand though. I do think it is difficult for him to go out and be an every week wide receiver too. I think more so what it looks like is he's an every other week wide receiver 1. And, the other weeks are not going to be fun. It'll be hard to predict. We've already seen him have so many explosive games and also a decent amount of touchdowns and good rushing usage. Deebo Samuel-esque, as someone points out in the chat, we have some Deebo Samuel news to talk about.
I saw that. We'll get to that in a minute.
We'll get to that. But his usage is healthy Deebo Samuel-esque. And I think in this version of the passing attack, that's going to lead to enough spike weeks for me to keep him plus Tracy over Mixon. But I would understand if you wanted to take Mixon here. I don't think it's lopsided either way.
I think Mixon is clearly the most valuable guy in the deal. Like, he's had 3 games where he's been healthy and he's cleared 100 yards in all 3 of them. Like, that's pretty hard to find at running back these days. But he's old. He's already been hurt once. And that is real value on side. It's a 2 for 1. 2 for 1s, in general, the guy giving away 2 is like they're getting the best player. And I would say Joe Mixon's the best player in the deal. But that is real value on side 1. Real quick, let's try to establish the Josh Downs line. Are you dropping Josh Downs for Romeo Doubs or Tyler Lockett? I'd say definitely yes on Doubs, just because I like those touchdowns in that part of the board. Not as sure with Lockett. What do you say, Kyle?
Totally agree. I'm sure I wouldn't for Lockett, and I'm sure I would for Doubs.
So yeah, Deebo Samuel hospitalized with pneumonia and fluid. Well, fluid in his lungs is pneumonia. Like, our guy looked absolutely miserable on the sideline. So I'm actually really not that surprised to learn that he had pneumonia. It's probably no timetable for return. I mean, he might only miss 1 game. Does this change? I don't know how you're supposed to process this, Kyle, but does Deebo probably missing week 8 change anything you said earlier about Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall? I'd say both have to be added, like must adds, especially at this point with no Deebo. But yeah, any thoughts to add?
I mean, frankly, I think it's even probably better for Ricky Pearsall in that I agree with you. You're right that like Shanny's going to do the thing where Juwan comes back and we get Ricky Pearsall knocked back down to a 60% route rate. And we're like, I can't believe we got rug pulled on the most obvious. Like, he loves doghousing he loves his veterans. He loves doghousing the rookies. He got to earn it. And last week they got to earn it just was not an option. I mean, as we see, Deebo Samuel was so just shouldn't have even been out there, as we can tell now.
No, and should not have been standing.
Yeah, exactly. Should have been laying down in a bed getting antibiotics or whatever. Yeah. And Brandon Ayuk obviously didn't come close to finish the game. I don't know how many snaps he played, but it was less than half of the snaps, I believe. So they didn't have that choice. They probably would have had that choice if Juwan Jennings was available. They're back to not having the choice of Ricky Pearsall, 60% routes, 3 targets. So the fact that I said he was maybe not a great short-term bet, but a really awesome long-term bet. Now he is both a really good short-term bet and a really good long-term bet. But as you point out, Juwan is like a 100% roster rate player as well now.
I think Juwan over the next month probably outscores Ricky Pearsall, but they're both like, you got to get them on. They're like, get them on your roster type of players. What would you say if you somehow had 100% of your fab left? What would you spend on Ricky Pearsall?
60 to 70.
Really?
How many more bets? Like, we probably won't get another bet like this at receiver.
That's true. It's first round receiver too. Yeah, that strikes me as correct. Actually, 60 to 70 does sound correct on Ricky Pearsall. Someone correctly pointing out that Dontavian Wicks is the bank examiner's dream. I could not agree more. He's like the platonic ideal of a bank examiner player. Gamer Bro, can we all say the Lions are the team to beat he says the NFC. I think the Lions are the team to beat clearly in the NFC at this point, even without Aiden Hutchinson. Do you agree with that, Kyle?
Yeah.
They've got team on a mission. Like, the Lions I've been underestimating now for 2 straight years. And I kind of wondered, like, if that was their absolute peak last year, where like they're getting so much out of some guys that it's hard to get a lot out of, like Jared Goff. I wondered if like Dan Campbell had just reached his peak, like motivation and scheming, and he just clearly had not. Clearly a special coach. Ben Johnson, a special coordinator, of course. And the Lions, they're the classic team on a mission to get narrative street on you.
No one else is like that close. I mean, the Vikings kept it really close with them, but I think they're a better team than the Vikings. The 49ers are just a shell of themselves talent-wise right now. And without Ayuk, they don't have a clear path to change that for for the rest of the season, frankly. They'll get Debo back at some point and CMC as well. No, the Eagles are whatever. They're fine, but they're not the Eagles of 2022 or whatever.
Got time for one or two more questions here.
Cowboys are frauds, of course.
Okay, Cowboys, humongous frauds. There's a lot of chatter going on. I'm trying to find some questions. I actually
want to rabble.
There's a lot. Yeah, you guys are having a lot of fun in the chat tonight.
I cut that out. Class.
CMC poorly, still unlikely. CMC just seems like circle week 10, Kyle. And if you start getting reports he might not be back for week 10, I would give up the dream. Like if this guy cannot get back for week 10 after the bye, like stop waiting on it, basically. I would circle the calendar on week 10 for Mr. Christian McCaffrey, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can personally, I would just cross out week 9. I don't even see why at this point they would, or I guess week 8, as in
week 8,
week 9. Yeah, that's what I meant. I would just cross out week 8. Why, given the nature of his injury and the fact that it continues to seem like, oh, got a little worse. It's in both legs now. Like he went to Germany for a specialist. Not only don't rush him back, but play it extremely cautious. And you've got the opportunity to do that with the bye week. That is what they're going to do. So yeah, circle week 10, but in pencil, as in, I don't know if that week is a guarantee. I'm pretty sure week 8 is a guaranteed not.
I think I've had several people ask this question again. We talked about the Browns receivers earlier in the show. Just off the top of your head, rank rest of season PPR points from the Browns receiver core. And the Browns receiver core right now is Jerry Jeudy, it's Cedric Tillman, it's Elijah Moore. Rank rest of season PPR points from those three, Kyle.
Jeudy, I'll go Jeudy, Tillman, Moore.
Yeah, Moore, man. I'm just not. I'd much rather bet on any unknown upside with Cedric Tillman than Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore just seems like he is maxed out. He is absolutely maxed out, I think. And you're just not, even with Jameis Winston. Hopefully it's Jameis, by the way, man.
I think it is. I mean, obviously it's a weird situation, but the fact that DTR played over him is concerning, but immediately gets injured. That's going to be, even if they don't want to play Jameis, that's going to be their excuse to do so, I'd imagine.
I think DTR was two different things. I do think there really was an element of spite. I mean, like everyone thinks we should bench Deshaun Watson. Guess what? We're farther away than ever from benching him, guys. Yeah. And I do think it was a little that, we're getting blown out a lot. Why? Who do we want to be the number 2 quarterback? Maybe we'll get DTR some work late in these games. I think now the starter has been injured. Jameis is going to ascend to starter status. And now DTR can be active every Sunday without it being emergency number 3 status. So I do think that is what's going to happen. I think Jameis will be the quarterback. Hopefully we get official word like in the next day or two. But I guess we'll end the chat here. We had some really good questions tonight, really good participation. Sorry if we missed you. Hopefully we got to everyone. Everyone as we reasonably could. I said sorry if we missed you. Then I said hopefully we got to everyone. That's an oxymoron there. We did not get to everyone. But good luck this evening. Good luck this week. It's a pretty packed week on waiver wire, especially since there are 32 teams active, as we cried about earlier. So check out Kyle's column. Check out his 32 stats later this week. Check out his start and sit 'em later this week. Check out my rankings later this week for all your start sit decisions. So for Kyle Dvorchak, I'm Patrick Daugherty. Thank you for listening. I'll be podcasting on Tuesday with Mr. Denny Carter.